When I say shonen, a certain vibe comes to mind. If you're a fan of anime and manga, you've definitely heard the term thrown around constantly in various contexts. Ranking shonen protagonists, critiquing shonen tropes, battle shonen supremacy, ranking the best sports shonen, so on and so forth. Shonen is the beating heart of anime and manga culture, but at the same time, it's one of the most misused and misunderstood terms in the community. Is shonen just a demographic? Or a genre? A formula for storytelling? Why is it that Attack on Titan is somehow considered shonen, while something like Vinland Saga or Kingdom is not? Why are some people so quick to dismiss shonen as juvenile power of friendship fluff, while others treat it like the zenith of the medium that has the very best that manga can offer? This video is a brief dive into what shonen really is and isn't. We're going to unpack the technical definition, examine the cultural surroundings, reader expectations, and explain why I believe that it doesn't really matter what label you slap on it, so long as we all agree that shonen is one of a kind. Let's start with the basics, the technical definition. The term shonen just means young boy in Japanese. That's it. Technically speaking, it isn't a genre, it's a demographic classification referring to content marketed towards young or teenage boys. The label exists purely to designate which magazine the story is published in. Weekly Shonen Jump, Shonen Magazine, Shonen Sunday, these are some examples of the various magazines that target young male readers. So, if a manga appears in one of these, it is, by definition, a shonen manga. That's all it takes. The same goes for seinen, which are manga published in magazines targeted towards adult men, shoujo for young girls, and josei for adult women. So yes, Haikyuu, Bleach, One Piece, Naruto, Blue Lock, Attack on Titan, all of these are shonen, despite their wildly different tone, genre, and content. For such a simple thing, you'd be surprised how often people get this wrong. I don't know how many times I've had to tell somebody that Attack on Titan is a shonen. It is often mistaken as a seinen because of its violence and mature themes. But it was published in Bisatsu Shonen magazine, so by publishing standards, it is definitively and undeniably a shonen. The fact it is mistaken for a seinen speaks to a similar misunderstanding present for stories within that demographic. Seinen manga are often homogenized, similar to shonen, due to some shared tropes and tones. But just like Attack on Titan is mistaken to be seinen because it's more mature than the majority of its shonen counterparts, there are seinen manga like Aoashi, which are often mistaken to be shonen due to the lack of violence, mature themes, and explicit content. This confusion exists because people mistake the tone, complexity, even just the nature of the content for its demographic. Which brings us to the real issue. Why do so many people think shonen means action manga with friendship and power-ups? Because that's the cultural genre shonen has become associated with, especially through the lens of Weekly Shonen Jump, which has arguably defined the global perception of what a shonen story looks like. This isn't always the case, but oftentimes when people talk about shonen tropes, they're referring to protagonists who never give up, an emphasis on friendship and teamwork, training arcs, tournament arcs, power systems, clear-cut good versus evil, and there's honestly a valid reason for this. All of the things I just listed are recurring narrative patterns, the result of decades of successful series shaping reader expectations. The trend absolutely does exist. And as a natural result of this trend, you'll find people unfortunately critiquing this as being formulaic or childish. And fans of shonen manga will often clap back by correctly stating shonen is just a demographic label. And they're right, technically speaking. But here's where I stand, with a slightly different take. Both sides are wrong if they think that's the full picture. Yes, shonen is technically a demographic, but culturally it functions like a genre. That duality is very central to my personal view on many of these stories and how they overlap. Think about it like this. In Western publishing, young adult fiction is technically just a demographic label, but it's also understood to have a certain tone and vibe. identity struggles, emotional stakes, coming-of-age themes. You expect certain beats in a young adult novel before you even start reading, whether it's romance, fantasy, or sci-fi. There's just a certain feeling to it, an expectation you subconsciously have if you've been exposed to various stories under that label. Now, this obviously doesn't mean every single story will match that vibe. It isn't a requirement or limitation, and there are several young adult novels that don't fit this picture that has formed over years of different publications. But the vibe is definitely there. Shonen is the exact same thing. While technically referring to the audience, the cultural expectations of shonen manga have created an umbrella genre within manga. Doesn't matter if it's a sports manga, battle manga, fantasy, even gag manga. There's a certain vibe that is shared by many of these stories under the shonen label. There's a reason people can say this feels like shonen even if the manga is technically something else, even if it isn't a manga at all, and there are countless reasons for this. For one, many authors of shonen manga grew up reading shonen manga. They are massively influenced by their predecessors. They are writing stories directly inspired by the ones that came before. And this spans generations, like a domino effect. So over decades of manga, an emotional lexicon between creators and readers has been formed that continues to evolve. Then there's editorial influence. Weekly Shonen Jump, for instance, has an established motto for the magazine: friendship, effort, victory. That mindset is practically a mission statement for dozens of Jump series over the last 50 years, and it's an incredibly challenging and competitive environment, with manga being axed left, right, and center if they don't match the magazine's needs. It is a carefully curated identity with painstaking deliberation going into every single issue. And as previously stated, this is not limited to battle manga. Haikyuu is a sports series with no death, no combat, and no magical powers, but still pure shonen at heart. With all that being said, the times are definitely changing. While there are and probably always will be shared vibes between shonen manga of all generations, as the world changes, as people change, the stories we read change as well. Jujutsu Kaisen is unabashedly shonen but carries certain qualities that are reflective of recent times. There's a certain cynicism present in the storytelling that is harder to find the further you go back in the history of the magazine. And I love that. It's refreshing and exciting. But when a story goes about things a little differently, you run into another issue in anime and manga discourse. One of the biggest misunderstandings I've seen is the idea that if a shonen doesn't follow the usual patterns, then it must be something else, a deconstruction, a critique, or not shonen at all. But this is exactly the kind of thinking that misrepresents what shonen is capable of and treats it like this amalgamation of certain tropes, thereby robbing it of its diversity. Hunter x Hunter is the most infamous example. It's often mislabeled a deconstruction of shonen manga, as if it exists to dismantle or challenge the traditions of the stories under the label. But in my eyes, Hunter x Hunter is unapologetically shonen in heart, soul, and even structure. Why this misunderstanding exists is because this story is undeniably special and unique, despite the great number of similarities with its contemporaries, and it does so by being subversive without abandoning the core of shonen identity. Hunter x Hunter doesn't work because it tears shonen apart, it works because it embraces shonen and pushes its boundaries. It's proof that the genre can hold multitudes. It's a canvas for creators to do anything with. And we've been seeing a lot more of this in recent years, with Jujutsu Kaisen, which I mentioned earlier, Chainsaw Man, and most recently Kagurabachi. These series aren't deconstructions of shonen, they're just shonen done a little differently. And even that feels kind of wrong to say because Bleach and Naruto are also two shonen done very differently. The reason this desire for a story to be different than the rest even exists is because the shonen banner is often viewed as inherently lesser. Shonen fans have this weird inferiority complex, and seinen fans have an even weirder superiority complex. And that's the main reason why I wanted to make this video, because that couldn't be further from the truth. Nothing about it is inherently lesser or better. And personally, there's nothing I love more in storytelling than shonen manga. Whether it's a lighthearted sports story or a bloody existential thriller, the world of shonen allows for it, encourages it even. So let's circle back to the original question. Is shonen a genre or just a demographic? Technically speaking, it's definitely just a demographic. Culturally, it has become a genre after decades of trends and patterns being formed, with readers engaging with shonen in a very specific way. But practically, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, this is all just semantics. The main point I'm trying to convey with this video is that the shonen label is simultaneously something that doesn't really matter and also representative of a culture that should be celebrated. Some people put way too much stock into the label, and some other people, usually in response to people making a big deal out of the shonen name, reduce it to nothing more than just a demographic when, in my opinion, the middle ground is the best position. There are undeniably recurring patterns among these stories that make them hits in similar ways, and that's a beautiful thing. It speaks to the impact of these stories not only on us readers, but the creators in the space who impact one another. But the second this shonen label starts limiting our appreciation for the individual identities of these stories, the second people start to homogenize all shonen manga and paint their opinions on them with the same brush, we have a problem. Because at the end of the day, a shonen manga can be anything, and that's what makes it so special. This was a very different video to what you may be used to on the channel, but it's a topic that's been on my mind for a while, and I thought, why not give my take in a short video? Please share your own takes on the topic in the comment section down below, and with that being said, I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one.